Hey guys, I am IzDaisho, and I am here bringing you some magic strategies. Today I'm going to be giving you the deck guide for the deck Grave Whispers, and I know a lot of you have been looking forward to this for a while, and some of you have never heard of me, but all of you guys who are watching this, I'm going to be trying to give you the best way that I find to run this deck. I think it's a pretty strong deck, and could be one of the best, maybe not. I had some luck and some not such luck. I don't really know the best way to say that. But basically, I played this game yesterday with this exact setup every time. I finished about 15 wins and 7 losses, I think. One of the losses was against this deck, so that doesn't really tell you exactly how well this deck does against other decks. But of the losses, a majority of them came against the vampire deck. I think 3 out of my 7 losses were against that, and that's one thing that this deck doesn't prepare for. If you want, there are some things that you can do better than the way that I do just for playing against vampires, but this deck was 3 or 4 and 1 against Unquenchable Fire, and obviously that's one of the better decks in the format. So anyway, I'm just going to go through it. I'm going to go through this card by card, and I'm going to tell you exactly why I chose each card. For those of you who came here from Top Tier Tactics, thank you so much for coming, and I hope you enjoy the video. For those of you who are on my channel, go check out the article that I posted on Top Tier Tactics. I'll link it in the description below, and it'll give you a better idea of why I run the deck the way I run the deck. Anyway, I'm going to get started. Sorry for all that intro. Okay, here is Quest for the Gravelord. This is the first card. Whenever a creature dies, you may put a quest counter on Quest for the Gravelord. Remove 3 quest counters from it, sacrifice it, put a 5/5 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield. This card is kind of interesting. It really has a combination of reasons why it's in the deck. So basically, there's a decent amount of removal in this deck. So whenever one of my creatures dies, or whenever I kill one of their creatures, it kind of double benefits me. In that, whenever I kill one of their creatures, it benefits me because it gives me a counter, and whenever one of my creatures dies, and that's also useful because it gives me a counter. And then, I mean, a 5/5 zombie is really powerful, and I only have to really spend 1 mana for it. The others are kind of just doubling up, so that's really useful. The Rack is one of the best cards in the deck. As the Rack enters the battlefield, choose an opponent. At the beginning of the chosen player's upkeep, the Rack deals X damage to that player, where X is 3 minus the number of cards in his or her hand. So most of the time, your opponents will be top decking by turn 4, turn 5, and that basically means that they're going to be taking 2 or 3 damage per turn. The next reason why the Rack is a really good card is because they see, oh my god, I'm going to be taking 4 damage. I'm going to be taking 3 damage next turn. I better keep this card in my hand, and then they just don't play their cards. So that's also really beneficial to you if they're just keeping their cards in their hand. The way I see it, whenever you play a card that makes your opponent play in a way that he doesn't want to be playing the game, then you're doing something right. Consume Spirit is a kill card, basically. It can also win you the game, late game, and it also gains you some life, but the reason why it's in the deck is to kill those, like, 2-drop creatures, 2 toughness creatures, 1 toughness creatures, and maybe later on in the game, if you really need to, you can kill 3 or 4 toughness creature, but basically, you can just read it, spend only black mana. Obviously, that's not really an issue since this is a mono-black deck, but Consume Spirit deals X damage to target creature or player, and you gain X life. So it's pretty decent. Doomblade is one of the best cards, except the only problem is Grave Whispers, which is the deck that I'm playing, and Vampires are 2 of the 3, in my opinion, 2 of the 3 or 4 best decks in the format, and they are both mono black. So when you draw this card against either of those decks, it's absolutely useless. It does nothing for you, and that's really unfortunate. But if you play against any other deck, then 2-cost spot removal is really thin in this format. I think Go for the Throat, Urge to Feed is kind of like a kill card. It's not even spot removal. It's just kind of a removal spell, but it's pretty good. I really like this card, obviously, against any other deck other than Vampires, and that was one of the issues that I had when I was running this deck against Vampires. I always drew 1 or 2 of these a game, so he was at least 1 or 2 cards up on me. Liliana's Caress is another really good card for this deck. Whenever an opponent discards a card, that player loses 2 life. So it's pretty self-explanatory. You're going to have a lot of discard cards, and this is going to help you along in your goal to slowly chip away at their life total. I mean, obviously, Doom Blades and Consume Spirits are part of your goal to slow them down so that you can get your bigger creatures out and stuff like that. Marsh Casualties is a 2 cost, and it has a kicker for 3. Usually, you're going to pay it for its kicker cost, so really consider this card a 5 drop. But creatures target player controls get -1/-1 until end of turn, and if it was kicked, then they get -2/-2 until end of turn. Obviously, this card is amazing. It will pretty much wreck the elves single-handedly. This card will basically win you a game. If you get to a 5 drop against elves and sometimes Oromancer, it pretty much just wins you the game. Reassembling Skeleton is a good card, and I run all 4 of them. It helps you block. Obviously, it can chump block and then it can come back. So it's like Regenerate. It's sort of like Regenerate, and it's a pretty good card for this deck because it slows them down. I mean, it doesn't really slow them down, but it slows them from attacking you, and that's really good because I mean, every once in a while they have a creature with 1 toughness and they don't want it to die, but they really can't do much to get rid of it. Even Unquenchable has trouble with this card. They kill it, you just return it. They kill it, you return it, you kill it. It just keeps happening. And the best part about this card is it'll let you stall the game until you can play your more expensive cards. And the another problem with this deck is a lot of the cards are 3 or 4 costs or more to get going. So I really like this guy here. Now moving on to more of the discard cards. None of your discard cards cost less than 3. And here they are, basically. I have almost all of them in the deck. There's a couple that I really didn't like, so I took them out. But as a general rule, you should run almost all your discard cards so that you can get them top decking as soon as possible. That way, they're at such a disadvantage. Anyway, Hypnotic Spectre is flying whenever it deals damage to an opponent. That player discards a card at random. Obviously, discarding a card at random is much more in your favor unless the player is really bad, and he would have made a bad decision on which one to discard. But in general, players will discard their worst cards, and this card basically just Hypnotic Spectre just completely ignores that, and it just says you have to discard randomly. Important to note, if you're holding a Mind Rot and you still have this guy in the field for a couple of turns, you want to play the Mind Rot first. That way they discard 2 cards that they don't necessarily want, and you have a higher percentage of getting rid of one of the cards that they really need to use. Next is Liliana's Spectre. It's a 3-cost 2/1 flyer, so right there it's a decent creature. I wouldn't run it. In fact, there's a Gloom Hunter that I don't run, which is exactly that, a 3-cost 2/1 flyer. But its other ability is why it's in the deck. It just makes my opponent discard. Mind Rot is just target player discards 2 cards. Again, really good card for this deck. I run all 4 of them. For a while I had 3, but there's so many opportunities where you're just like, man, I wish I had a Mind Rot. Man, I wish I had a Mind Rot. The only problem is when you get towards the middle and end of the game, you don't always want a Mind Rot, because at that point in the game, you're really just they're top decking anyway, and they're playing every card per turn. So this card becomes essentially useless about halfway through the game. So it's not necessarily the best card, but it's just so necessary to have 4 of them so that you can draw one at the beginning. It's so great to make them discard 2 cards towards the beginning of the game. Quag Sickness is one of your best removal spells because it pretty much destroys the Oromancer deck in that it gives them totem armor. It helps you against vampires because it can actually kill them. The vampires are resistant to other methods of removal. It'll kill a vampire Nighthawk really easily, as opposed to you needing 5 lands to be able to even touch a vampire Nighthawk with Consume Spirit. So that's why this card is a really good card. It also, I mean, it's just a kill card, and it's a good kill card. Guldra's Spectre, I know a lot of people don't really think it's that good of a card, but as I've been mentioning previously in this video, you're going to be at the point where they're top decking. If they have 1 card in hand, then they don't want to play that card, and then that puts them in a terrible position, because then they're in the position not only are they top decking, but they also don't want to play the cards in their hand, and that's really not good for them, because if they leave the card in their hand and you still swing in with this card, then they have to discard it, because that's the secondary ability. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, they have to discard it. So they're just never in a good position when you have a Guldra's Spectre out on the field and they're top decking. Anyway, let's move on to the rest of the cards in the deck. Really don't have much to do with discarding. They have more to do with winning. So Mortivore is kind of neither. It's just a really good card, and it benefits because you make them discard. So basically you just make them throw away all their good cards and then all their creature cards and stuff, and then you just play this dude, and he's pretty strong. He's not always that strong. Sometimes he's only like a 2/2 or a 3/3 by the time you get to play him, but he still has Regenerate. So and Regenerate for 1 mana, so that's really good. So no matter what he is, he's still really powerful, and he's at the very least he's a good chump blocker. Beacon of Unrest is an interesting card because basically once you play Mind Rot turn 3 or whatever, then your opponent's gonna notice that they're not gonna be able to get their expensive cards out, and if they have Inferno Titan in their hand and they're playing Unquenchable, then they're gonna want to save their mana. So then you're gonna be able to use Beacon of Unrest, go into their graveyard, pick out their best creatures that they had to discard, and now they're on your field on the battlefield under your control. Bloodgift Demon is an absolutely amazing card. I actually did a sealed draft tournament today and I picked one up. Unfortunately, I didn't run the color. I didn't run black because I didn't have a lot of other good black cards. But Bloodgift Demon is such a good card. It has flying. First of all, it's a flying 5/4 for 5. So that's already pretty good. But then its other ability is so good in this deck. At the beginning of your upkeep, target player draws 1 card and loses 1 life. So generally, you're going to want to do it on you. You're going to want to make yourself lose 1 life, which is a very small price to pay for drawing 2 cards every turn. Every turn you get to draw 2 cards. But I'm going to go back to an earlier card. Liliana's Caress. This card, whenever an opponent discards a card, that player loses 2 life. So let's say you have Hypnotic Spectre on the field, and you're playing a deck that doesn't run too many instants, say Elves. It only runs about one instant, Might of the Masses. I believe it has 1 card with Flash also, but nobody runs that, Epic Proportions. So you have a Hypnotic Spectre out, then you, at the beginning of your upkeep, you make them lose 1 life, draw an extra card, then you swing in, you get to deal an extra 3 damage to them because of it. Obviously, if you have Gul'Dra Spectre, you're not going to want to run that strategy because it's going to be a 5/5 anyway, but that is always a possibility. Just keep that in mind. In general, you're going to want to make yourself lose it, but if the game is nearing the end and you need a couple more damage, then you can always throw that out there. But again, this ability is so powerful making yourself draw, and you never want to make them draw if you're not going to make them discard the card that turn. Then there's these 3 cards which are just absolutely amazing. Alright, Ob Nixilis the Fallen. Landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may have target player lose 3 life. If you do, put 3 +1/+1 counters on Ob Nixilis the Fallen. So this guy's a 3/3 for 5. But he gets really strong really quickly, and he deals a lot of damage to your opponent. The problem that I found is that by the time I have 5 and 6 lands, I'm not really drawing too many. So it's going to be 3 life every couple of turns. That doesn't take away from the fact that you should play this guy when you have 6 lands, play him for 5, then play the land afterwards. Then you got a 6/6 that already dealt 3 damage for 5 costs. So it's an excellent card. And if you ever draw another one, it's a 9/9. It's going to win you the game when you play this card. That's the way this runs. And that's why I have it in the deck. I have all those cards towards the beginning that let the game go on, made them play slower, made them discard all their good cards, just so you can get out cards like this, this, and this. So now I'll go back to Grave Titan. Grave Titan was one of the promo cards, and this card is amazing. It's a 6/6 Death Touch. Whenever Grave Titan enters the battlefield or attacks, put 2/2/2 zombie creature tokens onto the battlefield. Obviously, that is just absolutely amazing. I don't need to explain it. All this guy does is make more and more creatures. You can swing in every turn, even if they kill it. Even if they kill it the first time you swing in, it still made you 4 creatures, probably took out at least 2 of theirs, or if it didn't take out 2 of theirs, it took out a really, really good one, and it made you 4 2/2s. That's just amazing for 6. And then there's Massacre Worm. When Massacre Worm enters the battlefield, creatures your opponents control get -2/-2 until end of turn. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, that player loses 2 life. This is Marsh Casualties, which we read before was, I think, a very good card, and that was 5 cost to do the same thing. This card makes them lose 2 life for each of the creatures that dies. Forever, not just this turn, forever. Plus, it's a 6/5 creature. If this guy doesn't win you the game, then you must have been in really, really bad shape before it. So anyway, now I am going straight into the 20 cards that I don't have in the deck, and I'm going to tell you why I don't have them in the deck. Not all of them are bad cards. A lot of them are actually pretty decent, and a lot of them might work in this deck in a different way you run it, because there's so many ways to run each deck in this game. But this is just the way that I run it, and this is the way that I think that you should all run it. I'm basically just telling you this is a way to run it, not the way to run it. So with that statement, I'm going to head straight into it. This is Disentomb. Return target creature from your graveyard to your hand. It's a pretty good card, but the way I see it is it's not really giving you any card advantage. You play this card and you go get a card from your graveyard, so that's 1 for 1. And how often would you rather draw a Disentomb than a Liliana Spectre. Chances are what you're going to do is you're just going to use Disentomb on Liliana Spectre. But if you think about it, since you're only running 60 cards anyway, if you had the Disentomb in the deck, maybe you would take out a Liliana Spectre, and then it would just be replacing it, and I really don't think that's a good idea. But that being said, if you do run this card in your deck, a great combination is Liliana Spectre. You play Liliana Spectre. I know that sounds really, like, hypocritical and stuff, but I'm just going to go on with the example. You play Liliana Spectre, and then you make him discard, then he swings in, and he doesn't expect you to block because you have a 2/1 flyer, and you don't want to trade for his 2/2 whatever. And then you block, and they're like, what? Why did he block? Then the next turn you play Disentomb, and then you play this card again. You make them discard 2 cards. So that's pretty nice. Unholy Strength is an interesting card. If you've been following my channel, then you'll know I'm really, really not a fan of auras. I hate auras. I think that they're really bad. But that being said, this card has no place in this deck. This deck is built to every once in a while swing in with these flyers, chip away at their life total, chump block with these guys. These guys die all the time. Like, you really don't care. And then there's no, like, creatures that really benefit from having a +2/+1. If you were playing the vampire deck, then maybe you would throw those in if you wanted to put them on Tormented Souls or Quag Vampires, the one that gets Swamp Walk. But by the way, Quag Vampires is amazing against this deck. It's basically, it makes 2/2 unblockables for 3, so it's basically like Phantom Warrior, I guess. It really kills you. The person who I was playing against, who beat me a lot with the vampires, he got either a Tormented Soul or a Quag Vampires every game, and that's what killed me. But back to the game, Demon's Horn is a really bad card to run. But that being said, if you're playing against vampires and you're building this deck just to beat the vampires, the Demon's Horn is the card to run, because every time they play a spell or you play a spell, you gain 1 life. If you have 2 of these out at the same time, it actually might win you the game. But I refuse to endorse this card. It's almost never a good idea to run these cards unless you're 100% sure you know what deck your opponent's playing. But that being said, I'll move on. Gloomhunter is a 3-cost 2/1. I really don't like it, and there's so much better things that I could put in the deck, so I don't have it in there. Underworld Dreams, whenever an opponent draws a card, it deals 1 damage to her. That combos really well with the Bloodgift Demon thing that I said earlier. In that it'll chip away really slowly, and that was one of the, if you remember, that was one of the ways that I said that you should be able to win this game, is to slowly chip away. But it's 3 cost to play, and it in general it'll deal 1 damage per turn, and I just see that as like the opposite of this card. This card is a 1 cost, gain 1 life, and then there's Underworld Dreams. But Underworld Dreams isn't the worst card in the game, but there are other cards, like every card in here, I'm like, oh yeah, this is good. I'm glad I drew this. I'm glad I drew this, unless I'm playing Doomblade against vampires. But every card in here is like, in most situations, I'm glad I drew this. This one is just like, all right, I'm at 5 life and I need to draw something. I draw this, top deck this, and then I play Underworld Dreams, and it does nothing for me. Blood Tithe is really, really good in multiplayer or 2-headed giant. I would definitely recommend putting this card. In fact, all of these, like each player does something, are way, way, way more powerful if you have more than 1 opponent. But I'm pretty much just talking about for 1 opponent. So they lose 3 life, you gain 3 life. It kind of goes against the kind of way of the deck. It just deals instant damage at 1 point. It's not instant, it's sorcery, but it does damage at 1 point, and you gain life. Like, that's just, it doesn't fit. I don't understand. Moan of the Unhallowed is a really good card, and I mean, I just played in a draft today with Innistrad cards, which this is from, and it worked really well. It actually beat me like twice. This 1 card pretty much, because you can play it and then you can flash it back later, which is amazing, because then you get to, in essence, you played this 1 card and it gave you 4 creatures, even though it was 11 mana, but still, this card is absolutely amazing, but it really doesn't fit in the deck. It's a 4-drop, and you already have a lot of 3-drops and 4-drops that you want to be playing on your 4th turn. It has all of these, like all of the fixtures of your deck, these cards that make them discard, are all 3 and 4 drops. So by the time you get to this card, you're going to want to playing something else. That being said, this card can help you, and like if somebody threw this in their deck, took out maybe a Reassembling Skeleton or a Mind Rot, then I wouldn't be opposed to it, or even a Beacon of Unrest, and I wouldn't be opposed to it, but just in the current way I have it, this is how I run it. I don't have them in, but in the future I may put them in. So if you were gonna plan on commenting on the video, IzDaisho, Moan of the Unhallowed is a good card. You should have it in. I would just argue that you could make an argument for that. So anyway, Scavenger Drake isn't a good card. Whenever another creature dies, you may put a +1/+1 counter on it. So you basically have to kill you basically have to kill 3 creatures for it to be a good card. So 3 creatures have to die for it to be a 4/4. They'll just take it out before then. Plus, it has nothing to do with the deck. It doesn't chip away. I mean, I guess it chips away since it's a flyer, but it also doesn't really protect you that much. I just don't like it at all. Siphon Mind is interesting because it's that card. It's the kind of card that I talked about, that each other player does something. Each other player discards a card. You draw a card for each. Obviously, if you're playing Two-Headed Giant or anything, then you will for sure play this card because you'll get to gain 3, and then everyone will get will have to discard. So that's really good. But if you're just playing one-on-one, then it's 4 cost to make them discard 1 card and to make you draw 1 card. So it's not like, I would rather play Mind Rot, which is 1 cheaper and makes them discard another card. So I don't know. It's not bad though, but it's kind of, it's another one that's on the fence. Monomania is a really interesting card. It's a rare, which is kind of weird, but target player chooses a card in his or her hand and discards the rest. So if this was a 3-drop, then this would be like my favorite card in the deck. But since it's a 5-drop, there's a good chance that they're going to have 2 or 3 cards left in their hand by the time you play this. And it's going to, like, at most, it's going to be 5-drop to make them discard 3, which isn't bad. But again, there's so many situations where this card is going to be useless for you. Siphon Flesh is just, it's really not good in a 1v1. It makes them sack 1 and you get 1 creature. It's just not that good. And then there's this last card, Corrupt, which is always good. But again, it really has nothing to do with the deck. It's kind of like it really helps you win the game, but it kind of just like stalls for a little bit. I mean, it's not bad, and you can basically choose your picking with one of these 2, since they do the same thing. They kind of like help you win, and you can put Corrupt in, but I don't run it. So that was my deck. That's how I run Grave Whispers. I'm pretty confident in it. I win almost every game that I play. Yesterday was a really strange day, and I won 15 out of 22. 15 wins, 7 losses, and a lot of them were to the Vampires. But in general, I feel like it runs pretty well, and I hope that you guys find the same thing. Again, if you have anything to say, if you ever want to say, IzDaisho, you're an idiot for throwing this card out, then I am more than willing to listen to that, and I'll gladly have a conversation with you. And if at the end you say something and you convince me and I completely change the deck, I'll just put an annotation on this video and just say, hey guys, I'm talking, but what I'm saying is wrong. So you should stop listening to me and just fast forward to this point. But anyway, I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. Have a wonderful day. Bye.